We're a global company. We produce anything from like industrial chemicals through to stuff that goes into shampoos and all that kind of stuff. I'm responsible for all the BI sort of infrastructure. So we're a SAP house. So we have SAP BW, which is our data warehouse, and we have QlikView that sits on top of that. We don't use BW for any of the reporting. All our reporting comes through QlikView. We've had Qlik for about 4 or 5 years. I've been there knocking on for 2 years. We're starting to look at, well, we're working with Catalyst to move to Qlik Sense. It's probably going to take us 2 years at least, I think, to move across, just because it's a big change. We've got a lot of users all dotted around the world. Some are more literate than others, some are very illiterate. Some just literally want a dashboard, some want a report, we've got some dashboards which are literally tables, which if you could print it out will be as wide as this room. So all they do is they run it, they chuck it in Excel, but it's getting people to try and understand why you're doing that, what you're doing with it, what we can do to help make their lives a bit easier. And so that's pretty much us, I think.
Yeah. And we talked about last night about you've got products in L'Oreal, and we always said it's because you were worth it. Yeah. So yeah. As he says, one of those companies that you've never heard of, but a multi-billion-pound organisation sat in Yorkshire just off the M62 near Snake. So a really, really interesting homegrown organisation. Hey, do you want to give us a bit of a background?
Yeah, so I've come from a finance background, working in accountancy practice, banking, insurance, and then moved across to a company that was producing biofuels from wheat, which is where we started our Qlik journey. It was one of those from the directors go out and find us some good BI, random directors. We went and looked at the Tableaus, am I allowed to say that? The Tableaus, the Qliks of the world and the Power BIs. We decided at that point, this was 3 or 4 years ago, that Tableau and Power BI were a bit young, weren't enough internet chatter, and we didn't want to go near the cloud, so we ended up on Qlik. And then it's just been a mad journey of data, plugging everything in from the OPC data that's coming from the control computers that work valves and measure fluids, to finally then land at a competitor of Rob's, a building merchants over in Hull with 63 branches, pulling in GPS data now and tachographs as well as sales data out of the ERP, web data, basically in an agile way, just pumping out what people want. So going to see the managers of various departments, what do you do at the minute, what do you need, and just pumping it out. Just trying to get adherence, trying to get adoption. I think that's us.
Okay, great. I mean, just on that then, you're all dealing with lots and lots of different data. I think there's probably a question for you primarily around data warehousing, and you know, is there a data warehouse that sits within MKM, or is Qlik just bringing data into it through its ETL?
To be fair, and it was the same with Vivergo because they had lots of different types of data. I mean, the OPC data, we were monitoring 15,000 different bits of machinery every 5 minutes in a code that nobody uses. So we tend to, I don't know if everybody else is the same, but we tend to push it all through SQL. We tend to have SQL sitting underneath, and any ad hoc data will push into SQL. But nowadays we're punching as well out to the REST APIs on the Azure databases, I guess, from third-party software. So it tends to all kind of underline within SQL. Even the Oracle stuff, we're ODBCing or whatever across into Oracle and pulling that into SQL.
And Steve, from your perspective, just in terms of the benefits that you've seen Qlik bringing in the organisation, what kind of things have you been looking at?
So we use it for all sorts of different things. So because we're a SAP house, you would normally expect us to use business objects or something like that, but we don't. We use Qlik just because it's a much more powerful tool. Before I joined Croda, I'd never heard of it, but having sort of started to use it, I can see how much better it is than anything that's SAP offering at the moment. It allows us to get data quickly from our data warehouse and into a dashboard. We've a small team, so there's 2 people. We have 2 developers. Each dashboard has their own sort of pseudo developer in the business, so they do a lot of the front end development. But by having sort of a core team which does the ETL and then having developers in the business, we get much greater buy-in, and it just helps sell it.
Yeah, so two good examples there of where you've got somebody maybe using a data warehouse as a kind of single version, but actually using the capability of Qlik to really make that sing and talk to the organisation. Then you've got other areas of where Qlik works, where it's just pulling from lots and lots and lots of data sources without necessarily having to integrate it into any kind of data warehouse. So it's actually useful quickly. You can sandbox really, really effectively and get stuff out and up and running. So Phil, from a point of view of the kind of benefits that it's bringing, obviously catching criminals is one of them. But how easier has it made that role within the business?
It's turned it completely on its head. I mean, before we had Qlik, we were pushing things through Excel and through PowerPoint, and that was taking 3 or 4 days to publish all that information and get it out there. And now we're in a situation where we can cut off at 7 o'clock at night, and then come in the morning, run the month end, by 9 o'clock the pack's published and it's out there, and it's there for people to either look at immediately or to download and look at on desktops and however they want to view it. What's happened is that now, instead of concentrating on collecting the data, they're concentrating on what's actually in that data and how it moves and how it's trending and what they should be doing with it. So the nature of the beast in our environment is it's always retrospective, but then that is starting to change in terms of the information we're getting, and we're getting it because we're now getting it on a daily basis as well in some instances. It's starting to change the way that it's being looked at in terms of, right, well, how do we proactively look for this? And when you think about the fact that if somebody's making a call, for example, you've got a split second between pressing that green button or the send key on your phone to intercept that call. So we're looking at ways to try and prevent that from happening. That will happen somewhere else, but the results will come through into our reporting and reporting to Qlik. So that's starting to change the way that they're approaching things now. So the data is much more relevant, and it's much more easily for them to access, to start in what I call tunneling. They're then going down a line looking at something and then say, well, how's that working in West Africa? And go off and have a look at, so that's the West Africa picture. What's the whole Africa picture look like? And then that looks there, and so it's changed the way that it's approached considerably.
And there might be a question maybe about the use of predictive, maybe from the audience, because I suspect that would be an interesting aspect to what comes next. I'm wary that you've not had a question because you had 20 minutes to chat to everybody beforehand. But from your perspective, how are you seeing potentially augmented intelligence use cases within the business?
So I think that's just through the sheer volume of data that we've got now that we can start to look at those algorithms within the information. So one great example we had not long ago, which is looking at, do labour turnover impact bonuses? So we're just looking at, if people are leaving the business, then how does that align to things like employee engagement? Does that demotivate staff? And then does that link into bonus payments? So then we're starting to tell managers, actually, if you can increase employee engagement, decrease labour turnover, you're going to get higher bonuses and we'll retain our staff in a better way. So we can start to predict almost, if it's the adverse of that, then if we know that we've got low engagement, low or high turnover, then we're going to start to say, these are the pocket of people that are going to leave. And now we're trying to relate that into things like talent and succession. So we've got high performing managers, we can start to understand what's the kind of ideal blueprint of those managers. And if any of those areas start to become red on a KPI metric, then we can predict that they're going to leave. So we can actually have that conversation before that person's going to leave. So we are really starting to push that as much as we can. It's just getting the adoption of, we've got these raft of ideas, but again, how do we make it relevant so that they're going to change, basically?
But that's relevant to any talent management pool, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If you're using the right data from within the business, being able to correlate it against the factors that you're seeing for people being unhappy or for potential churning, then actually that could apply across any industry.
Yeah.
It's just that you've got a vast number of branches and stores and whatever to try and manage that on a bigger scale, haven't you? So you've had about 2.25 hours to think of a good question. I only need one from every table. So anybody got any questions for these guys?
think that's the holy grail as well. And I always say it's sort of like Henry Ford when he asked, you know, what would people want? They said a faster horse. People didn't even realise that cars were about, whereas we're sort of introducing helicopters to people that have been using horses. A spreadsheet is at best two-dimensional, and you bring into them an almost real-time three-dimensional tool. You've got to build it, and you've got to start showing nuggets coming off it, and then people start realising. So it's getting some proof of concepts with some really key stuff that will deliver impact. And once you start getting that, the floodgates open and everybody wants it.
The thing I'd say is that we really struggled with that, I suppose, to start off with. But now we've kind of, because our business is so kind of fragmented, we've kind of colluded together with all the senior analytical leads to start to say, well, how do we hit this agenda in the right way? Because we've got pockets of analysts just doing their own thing, and they like to repeat that exercise. Whereas now what we're saying to the exec is, actually, we spend X million on these analysts, X million on all of these systems. But if we brought in a tool which could visualize that for them, let's just get rid of those analysts. So it's almost the death of the analyst, I suppose, is the right way to put it. But that's the real business case, is that everyone should be using this tool. And you don't have to be an analyst. You just need to how to learn green, white, and grey, which is pretty simple.
Do you find, though, that those analysts now become analysts? Whereas before they were just report generators.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually. And we're starting to see an evolution there as well. So people are becoming more actually analytical rather than just churning out data. And that's a really a good positive change we're seeing as well.
I think one of the challenges as well is that trying to, as Adrian was saying, they're used to the horse. They've got no concept of what a helicopter is. And trying to get them to visualise. I sat in a meeting in Paris a couple of weeks ago where somebody said, can you build us this? And I said, yeah, but that's simple stuff. What do you want? And they said, well, we don't know. And trying to get them to visualise what's capable and the amount of data that you can handle as well. We're not limited to 1 million lines of data. 1 million lines of data in telecoms would last probably about 3 seconds. So it's moving that forward as well.
But from our side, when we're out there actually meeting people for the first time, we're trying to work with the analysts and the business to get a real understanding of what is your biggest challenge, and really try and hone in on that biggest challenge area to then focus what a proof of concept would look like. So if you can answer that challenge, you're a long way down that journey of basically convincing, influencing, and actually then being able to share that. And I'm sure any of these guys would jump on the phone to support conversation.
Yeah.
If you ever needed one.
I think that's actually, it's not something I visualise within our data, but ultimately within Qlik Sense, everything drills down to that rawest level of data. So when we do get those challenges, historically it was kind of like, oh my God, how do we answer this? Whereas now we've got to a part where, well, actually, all the raw data's here. So as you drill down, if you're looking at sales, employees, whatever it might be, if they don't believe it, well, you can get down to that raw level of detail that sits behind it and say, well, there you are, go reconcile it. And then you do get kind of issues with that, but then the more you keep answering them, the more they then trust it. And that's why we've now got these interfaces going out everywhere, because they trust our data sources. They know it's really kind of integral to part of the group. And because we've been through those kind of questions and answers around, is it really accurate? We now say yes. And that's probably the secondary part to my job now, is I just sell trust, like trust what I'm telling you.
How long did it take to get to that stage, do you think? That
Ages.
I think one way as well is to look at the reports that your company are currently generating that are taking time, that are representative of that data, and use that as your check and balance. Yeah. So how can you argue with this? The report that you trust says that you can't, from a finance background, I tie everything back to the general ledger, the sales ledger, the purchase ledger, and every other system comes off there, working with numbers, so it's easier for me, but I suppose HR data. With your HR system, you've got your personnel data, your headcount.
It's a cultural shift and a behavioural challenge that you've got within the organisation to try and address from the use of data in an IT world. And it's having that business buy-in that actually this version of the truth is there to accelerate and actually improve the capability of those worst performing. I mean, we're doing some work around worst performing branches in a couple of our clients, and actually really highlighting that, because again, it's a little bit like, you know, what in the talent pool is potentially going to make somebody churn? What in the actual data is showing me why these are worst performing branches? Is it the lack of customer acquisition? Can we work with you proactively to actually generate an improvement in that business area? And I think part of this, and we've not touched on it yet, is the ability for the leadership team to be more data literate, and to have that kind of data literacy mantra being used within the organisation, and using the likes of Qlik and that capability in significant meetings, because that builds the trust and that builds the power. And if it's right at C-level and management level, then it's right across all levels, top down, up down, whichever way you want to look at it. So,
from that point of view, we've targeted our group CFO specifically. He's set up a thing called the DNA program at the moment. So one of the things we did a couple of weeks ago is to go and sit with him for 15 minutes and just showed him what we've done in Qlik. So you want to go down to this digital transformation program, here's what we've been doing. And he just sat there, and it's lovely when somebody sits there of that stature and says, wow. And he said, I've got to change. Once we've got him on board, the rest of it, we've got to be careful, because that tsunami's coming towards us, we know, but we'll cope with it. But you know, to go back to one of the things you were talking about, one of the things that helped us along that way of getting people to understand the data was the ability always to just right click, export it to Excel, say, there's your numbers, go back and check them.
Yeah.
okay, so we touched a little bit around data literacy, but I'm keen to sort of just explore that a little bit further. Previously we had a little diagram up on the board. I'll see if I can just pull that up. But Rob, you were touching on data literacy. Can you just give us a bit of an idea as to where you're getting to?
So yeah, this is kind of like the journey where I'm working with the CIPD to help develop that people analytics module, but then also in-house we're looking at, do we develop a course? So how do we get that course set up so that we can start to educate people around, how do I interrogate data? How do I ask a hypothetical question? Even just from a real basics of the way that I've kind of learnt from the best are still good ideas. But basically, if you drew up a table of data of the people in your training course and just put down their genders, their favourite foods, etc., and then summarise that, just to say that's what you do with data. You've kind of got a raw set of data. It goes into a summary level. That's how we aggregate information. It's just counting up the binary, etc., and just getting them to be familiar with, we're always going with the lowest level of information and aggregating it up. So it's kind of really changing that mantra around, I'm scared of data, I don't know what it means, I don't trust it, I don't know what an average is, to going to that point of, we'll tell you, we'll go from the grassroots up. But then the flip challenge is we change the people. That's it's where we come back to. But I think anyone here today who's kind of thinking it's a struggle getting this data out and getting that buy-in, we're all there. So it's not people on their own. I'd say it's unanimous.
Yeah, very much. We're a lot earlier on. We don't really have that strategic vision about data literacy. So I'm basically just going behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
And the people that want it, that are excited about it, I'm geeing them up, and then hopefully it'll just propagate from there.
Well, we take the same
just try and get the champions.
Well.
Yeah. Yep.
Steve, what's going on at Croda?
Yeah, so we're quite early on the journey. We have a relatively new business analyst team, which will sit alongside sort of us as a technical team. So I guess part of their role is to get out into the business and just try and understand what they're doing, how they're doing, and also trying to bring people up to a more level playing field. We have a massive variety of users that somehow they struggle to use a mouse to other people that want to interrogate it to the nth degree. So our challenge is to find those different pockets of people and then try and get them all speaking a similar language. Croda over the years has bought loads of different companies, and with that comes all the different working practice, and everybody calls everything different. Like some people will call a material, some people call it a product, some people call it a SKU. So even at a basic level, we need to get people to call similar things. And it's only when we get to that point that we're probably even going to start on a sort of a data literacy journey, that we need to have a common language.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason I'll take some more questions in a minute. The reason I've pulled up the slide, and this is something that everybody within the room can take away. There is a program called Data Literacy, which is at dataliteracy.org, which has been developed by Qlik and one or two consultancy firms. It's not a Qlik-led initiative. It's a very broad look at why data literacy is important within your organisation, and how can you start to do some very, very simplistic benchmarking. We obviously at Catalyst took it to the next stage, and we created, the personas were already there. So there's a data aristocrat, a doubter, a data knight, and a data dreamer. There's an eight questions that you fill out on the dataliteracy.org, and it comes back and it tells you whether or not you're one of these. And as a result of coming back with that, it then gives you material that you can take back into your organisation to understand how you either maintain your capabilities at being a data aristocrat or a data knight, and actually bring other people into that kind of fold. The key thing for us, and we've all got them within our organisation, is data doubters. Yeah. Every organisation needs data doubters. It's challengers. It's I don't trust the data. Well, hang on a minute. Well, I'm at the bottom of this league table. Get over there. My gut instincts. I'm doing a good job. But part of this program is actually being able to say, well, how do I work with data doubters within my organisation? How do I help them to start to understand that actually data is important? 2025, you can have 5,000 daily interactions with data. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to actually prepare yourself for that challenge that's coming down the road? Because it's to use that word, it's a bit like a big wave. It's a tsunami. There is stuff coming, and we've got to be able to be in that position to be able to deal with that. So we can give you a bit more information about this and whatever, and the way that we've started to tackle it, particularly within Travis Perkins initially.
Your newer ones are always easier, aren't they? Because they're always more excited and they want to do new things. You're always going to get the third, the third that don't like it, the third that are inquisitive, and the third that love it. But at the end of the day, if you can just present to them something that saves them time, makes their job easier, keep it simple, and you'll get adherence, and then it just builds. Just trying to build that momentum and give them just a little bit more. But don't try and give them, that's what we kind of call it, the moon on a stick. Don't try and give them that, because it'll just knock them down and they'll just turn off. From mine, that's how we.
Yeah, like we actually had McKinsey and PwC and Deloitte all come in to review our organisation, and they started at that branch level, and they asked for them like feedback around what's good, what's bad, etc. with data and IT. But on the basis of that, we understood that branch managers probably need more hand-holding, I suppose, to get them into that role of being more successful in their roles. So we've somewhat bypassed that role to go up to more of a regional role and then cascade it down from there. So it's more of a longer-term strategy to get down to the branch managers, make sure we've got the right people in those roles. We
don't kind of have the same business model, because ours is completely devolved. Each of our branches are completely autonomous. They control their own strategy in terms of employment and what even wagons they have, things like that. So it's all about bringing the horse to the water, and if they don't drink, then fair enough. If you don't see the value in it, that other branch will, and they'll sell more and they'll make more money.
So moving from QlikView with the QMC, we've moved to Qlik Sense, which is much more agile. So we use Google as a platform for running all of our core agile infrastructure. So within Google, we've got specific section access designed against certain roles. So as roles change, then we're automatically updating those. So if you move from one brand, business, function, whatever, to a different area, we're always updating that. And it is a really, really good way of it, how it interfaces into Qlik Sense. So and for us, we had to do that for GDPR. So we had to be compliant with all of the relevant regulations. So it's actually a really good platform that we've now got within Sense, whereas QlikView felt a bit more difficult, I suppose.
We use Active Directory, so the same as your security levels within accessing various network drives, etc. Then you just write that into your Qlik access for section access or app access or whatever. So if somebody moves department, they no longer have access to that app.
Yeah, we have a quite a simple model. We use Active Directory groups to give you access to the app, and then if it's got section access, then there's, you know, if you're in LC customer X or region Y, whatever, that's managed within the QlikView QMC. Yeah. I haven't looked at how complicated Qlik Sense is for that, but I'm told it's easier.
Yeah, and we're the same. We run on section access, so that we've got people in, say, Ivory Coast, who can look at their information, then they can look at it in terms of the Western Africa, then they can look at it in terms of MEA, then they can look at it in terms of the group, but they can't look at any other country. So, you know, they can build their own view of what they want, but they're very limited in terms of what else they can see.
I think for us the 2 years is, yeah, well, some of our users will be petrified of Qlik Sense. They'll look at it and they'll have heart attacks because they just literally want to click a few buttons and get a report, whereas other people will want to get in there, get their hands dirty. So for us, we need to sort of think, because we've got such a vast ability of users and people are dotted all over the world, and we've probably got 20 or 30 apps in production at the moment with, you know, several others on the way. We just need to think about and plan, because we're a small team, we can't just go bang and throw it all out. Our exec, when they signed off the Qlik Sense project, said, yeah, we're happy to go with it, we think it's brilliant, but there's a load of BAU that needs to keep going on at the same time. So we've got to keep the wheels churning on the business and move to Sense at the same time and show people how to do it, what it can bring to them, and also keep the people that are worried calm, that they're not going to lose anything. They can still do what they do now, but they can do a ton of stuff more and try and turn off export to Excel at the same time, because that will be my aim, to turn that off. Now people will have heart attacks again about that, and they already have, but some people we can take that off them, because if we ask the right questions, they won't need to put it in Excel, but it is going to take a time to get to that and change people's way of thinking.
Yeah, on that as well, we're doing what we call paired development. So as we're helping with that transformation into Qlik Sense, we're looking at using Qlik Sense in some of the newer areas, as opposed to just taking an existing set of sales information. Actually starting to focus in an area that can actually take it forward. But the paired development stuff is really important. It's where we're doing collaborative sessions, and stuff isn't just getting thrown over the fence to a dev house that just goes, we need to build it like this, and then throw it back in and then hope that the business likes it. This is where we're actually sat with your team and the business users to actually exploit the opportunity to be quick and agile, ask questions. And it's always the same with a business user, isn't it? Well, I'm not quite sure what I want. Well, if you've got an 80% nearly almost bit there, it's the 20% of the polish that they add the massive value to. And if you can sit alongside them whilst you're doing that, and you've got a dev team learning that, it's a consultancy that you're building for yourself within your organisation, to be able to go out and consult effectively as a business analyst or as an influencer with your key stakeholders. So, any others about the QlikView Sense transition?
I guess ours was very different, really. So we had QlikView, and we had developers, so there wasn't anyone really actively using that as a platform bar the development team. So we engaged with Catalyst and said we want to migrate from A to B. They project managed that process so that we knew that we could get from A to B in a really clear, kind of like seamless way. But then the sell for us was actually to say to people, well, previously all you've had is end printing, lots of PDFs, but then the future is actually we're going to give you some really insightful, useful dashboards. So it was an easy sell, really, to go from you've not really had anything bar PDFs to now you've got something interactive. So it was done quickly because there was no real barriers around it, I suppose. I think a pocket with QlikView, using QlikView, I think Mike can confirm that, but yeah, the majority are moving to Qlik Sense as an estate now, yeah.
And all of the external focus stuff, so within the Wix brand, there is a portal, a web portal for supplier portals. About 3,000 suppliers come onto that, consume Qlik Sense objects, but in a web mashup. So the ability to, if you like, transform that business process and the interaction to develop true partnerships with suppliers has been quite critical in the way that some of that business has actually been developed. And the quotes coming back from the likes of gorilla glue to say, well, we never had this before. It was a monthly report. Now I'm on it every day. I can see my daily sales, my daily stock, and whatever. And getting again collaborative partnership working with your suppliers, and not just being seen as a supplier that you did claimbacks with and rebates with, and if you didn't do volume, you didn't do this.
Yeah.
Becoming more proactive in that space.
I think for us, we're working with a third party at the moment to look at customer churn, so we're sending data to them, they're chucking it into their black box and then sending stuff back. I suspect we can probably bin that off and have a go with I'll certainly have a go with Qlik Sense and see what it can do by comparison. I suspect we can probably do it and do it better, because it's been a long project with lots of bumps in it and there's flat files getting sent left, right and centre, and I don't think it's telling anybody a great deal that they didn't already know, so people aren't even really buying into it. But I suspect that a lot of that is because it's a third party and they just don't want to believe it, whereas if it's coming from internal data, they're more likely to buy into it. So I think for us that's something we can start to look at and doing things like that.
Bill, anything else?
Well, there's a lot of work going on as far as predictive is concerned because of customer behaviour on telecoms, and it's certainly an area that everybody's really focused on because we want to reduce the losses that we have. In terms of where Qlik can sit with that, but I think from where we are, because it's such a specialised area that we're in, that once we get to a point where people know what they want and what they're trying to achieve, then we can do something with it. But at the moment, there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there bringing other things to the market that say, well, we can do this and we can help you in that area, and we know what's going to happen when you launch certain products and in certain areas. But the reality is that it's not mature enough at the moment to be able to fully justify the investment in time and resource that we require. But it's certainly something that has got people spiked and they want to look at. So, but we've already crossed part of that Rubicon in terms of people now always coming back to the question or the statement about, well, can we do this in Qlik? And so that's always there in the mindset, which is a massive jump for us, really.
Yeah, I think for me, the problem is that my intelligence is lacking there. So at Vivergo, we were looking at machine vibrations to see when a machine was due to break down by itself learning the level of mean vibration, if you like. So you could do predictive maintenance on a machine. And I started looking into R, and really you need a degree in mathematics to start to understand things like linear regression, just basic things like that. So it's me that's lacking. We really wanted to start using it, and now that it's fully integrated with R, I know there was a plugin before. It could be fantastic, and there's massive values to be had in retail, no matter things like that.
Okay. And the last word from Lord Robert.
So yeah, you kind of, I guess in Travis Perkins, what we've got at the moment, we've got geeks who can speak, which is, hi. And then you've got the purist geeks, so we've started to employ data scientists. And because I've got a data kind of scientist background, I can now engage with this person who maybe can't speak as much, but they can look at these algorithms within the data. So it's just throw loads of data at them, give them hypothetical questions and get them to give us some evidence of whether anything's working there. So one of the examples at the moment is using the basket analysis, which Mike mentioned, and then correlating that against our driver network and looking at fulfillment to almost say, well, actually, if that driver had a suite of, I don't know, product on their lorry, and you're looking at all the customer patterns, could they overstock those products and actually deliver more whilst on their journeys? So you're starting to predict who might want to order something and where you could fulfill that from in a really logical way. So it's really stepping up as to more of an Amazon model to say, rather than it just being a driver takes a load of stock on their truck every day, take loads more stock, which you know you might sell, and just drop them off on your routes. And then you're maximising return and profit there.
Yeah.
Brilliant.